Good morning. Welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the Swannanoa Valley. Whoever you are and wherever you are welcome. You will find the covenant of the values we affirm and promote on our website, uusv.org. We do not have to think alike to love alike. We encourage all to pursue their paths toward the awareness we all seek. Let our service begin. Lighting the chalice today, we gather this hour as people of faith, with joys and sorrows, gifts and needs. We light this beacon of hope, sign of our quest for truth and meaning, in celebration of the life we share together. Our opening words today. Happy New Year. The start of 2021 gives us in the United States and the rest of humanity a renewed opportunity to begin again. In January 2021, this is much more than the trite cliche we hear at the start of every new year. The global pandemic has exposed everything that is wrong with decades of the world's governments engaged in competition and inequitable economic systems, devoid of morality and respect for our natural world. COVID-19 has demonstrated that if humanity is to survive this and the global climate crisis, every nation must accept its responsibilities as an integrated member of a global community. Humanity now has the opportunity to combine the values of ancient belief systems with the scientific discoveries of the past century to formulate a universal code of conduct that will assure the aspirations of succeeding generations. In the midst of this pandemic, American democracy has just survived the greatest trial since the Civil War. Here also, the pandemic has laid bare past wrongs that still persist. So in 2021, we can again resume the historical experiment of the United States, which proclaims equality throughout our population of many ethnicities, beliefs, and values. So, the start of this new year should mark the beginning of a new era of the changes for humanity to undertake to achieve the destiny we all desire.
This is hymn number 318, We Would Be One.
Our reading today from our manual is number 544, New Year's Day. The 1st of January is another day dawning. The sun is rising as the sun always rises, the earth moving in its rhythms. With or without our calendars to name a day as a day of new beginning, separating the old from the new, so it is. Everything is the same, bound into history, as we ourselves are bound. Yet, also, we stand at a threshold. The new year, something truly new, still unformed, leaving a stunning power in our hands. What shall we do with this great gift of time, this new year? Let us begin by remembering that whatever justice, whatever peace and wholeness might bloom in our world this year, we are the hearts and minds, the hands and feet, the embodiment of the best visions of the people. The new year can be new ground for the seeds of our dreams. Let us take this step forward together onto new ground, planting our dreams well and faithfully and in joy. This is a time when we as a community share our joyful events and those of concern as members of this extended UU family that we have created. So, as you wish, please let us share all of these joys or concerns.
Look out for the tree.
Hi, this is Evan. Just wanted to let the congregation know my grandmother passed away last Sunday. We held her funeral on Thursday, and it was good to see family that I haven't seen in a year, but unfortunate that it was under those circumstances. So I want to thank everybody for well wishes. But yes, coronavirus, it's real. So hopefully everyone is staying safe. And I'm glad that we're continuing to hold virtual services so that we can keep our congregation safe. Thanks.
For those of you who did not wish to share your joys and concerns, we keep you in our hearts. Our meditation and prayer today are taken from the words of Richard Gilbert. We pause in the holy quiet to reflect on matters of the Spirit. As citizens of a nation, as inhabitants of a planet, as participants in a cosmos, we ourselves are a universe. We are a world. We are an ecosystem, a complete system of thoughts and feelings, a web of love and hates, a matrix of anxieties and aspirations. May we find our own internal universe in tune with stars and suns and moons in their cosmic swirl. May we live in harmony with the inner ecology of our being. And now, while we are of one mind, I leave you with the eloquence of silence. This is a time when we ask you to share with us your generosity. As you know, your contributions to this congregation are put to good use in our community, especially during this pandemic. In the words of Edward Hale, I am only one, but still I am one. I cannot do everything, but still I can do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something that I can do.
This is hymn number 163, For the Earth Forever Turning.
We are fortunate in this UU congregation to have a number of members whose experience, learning, and perspectives can benefit others. One of these is Tim Perry, who has explored many avenues in his search for meaning and wholeness. His desire for honesty and truth has led him on a journey through various forms of Christianity, including the Presbyterian, Episcopal, and Roman Catholic denominations. Leaving these and wandering in the wilderness, as he put it, he ended up here among Unitarian Universalists, much to the delight of all the UUs who have come to know him. It's a pleasure to have him speak to us today. Tim's topic, 2021. How do we begin again?
Good morning. Let me begin with a little bit of a disclaimer. Because you're not physically here and I'm not physically there, I can't look at your faces and see if I'm bothering anybody, if I'm hacking anybody off. And you can't hurl a hymnal at me and storm out if I'm doing that. So let me just say the opinions expressed in this sermon are mine and mine alone. They are not the opinions of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of the Swannanoa Valley. They're not the opinions of its minister or its board of trustees or anybody else. They're mine. If I say something that bothers you, feel free to contact me. We can talk about it. But please don't blame anybody else. They're innocent victims in this thing too. That said, one of the things that I enjoyed most as a young man in school, one of the things I enjoyed most about school, that is to say, was that no matter how well or how badly things are going, the semester's going to end. You're going to reach a point where it's going to be done and it's finished, and you get to start over the next semester with a clean slate. And I found to my great disappointment that in the days after school, life doesn't give us that many opportunities like that. We kind of have to keep trudging through, and you wake up every day and you start from where you were the day before. And we don't often get those opportunities to start over. When they do come, sometimes they come at a great cost. And as Harry said, I think we're at one of those places now. We have an opportunity in lots of ways to move forward, to change some things, to do things differently and better than we have before. But it has cost us dearly. We've survived so far the worst pandemic in a century. I won't even quote any of the numbers. They're so staggering. And by the time you hear this, the numbers that I quote that are accurate when I'm recording this will be wrong. They'll already have been overshadowed by even more staggering numbers. Some of us have lost loved ones. Some of us have lost jobs, homes. All of us have lost routines and ways of doing things that we may never get back. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've lost a year of my life. I mean, it's winter again, and I feel like I haven't even had summer. I never even got to do any of the fun things I usually do in the summer. It seems like we've just been in this weird limbo. And along with all the other things we've lost, I think one of the things we've lost that we don't hear as much about and talk as much about, but I think is really important to all of us and that we're really feeling the weight of, we've lost the illusion of security. Now I say illusion because that's really what it is. We never really had security. We just like to think we did. As a foolish young man, I lost a perfectly good girlfriend because I shattered that illusion. We were talking about money because it was becoming obvious to us that we had different approaches to money, and she seemed to be a lot more concerned about it than I did. And so I said, well, how much of it do you want to have? And she said, well, enough to have a a nice car and a nice home, and enough to be secure. And I said, and this is where a wiser man would have nodded and said, I understand. I was not a wiser man. And I said, oh, that doesn't exist. And she said, what do you mean? And I said, you can never have enough that somebody can't take it away from you. You can never have enough that you can't lose it. I think that was the beginning of the end of that relationship. But we've lost a lot of things. We've lost, all of us have lost things in this pandemic, some much more than others. But we've had a second interwoven tragedy that, as Harry mentioned, has revealed a lot of things about the virus has revealed this other tragedy in ways that we might not have fully seen it if it hadn't. And the full extent of it has been revealed by the failures in dealing with this virus. I call it, for lack of any better term, a pandemic of willful ignorance. Now, ignorance is okay. I mean, we all start out that way, and some of us end up that way, more or less. But this is a different kind of ignorance. This is a willful ignorance. It's illustrated by people who still to this day, in spite of everything you can see on the news every day, if you turn it on for 5 minutes, people who still insist that this virus is no worse than a flu. Fully 1/3 of our population rejects the authority of any science that is beyond their grasp. And a lot of science is beyond my grasp. I can't begin to understand quantum physics, but I don't deny that it exists. But we have this cult of willful ignorance that does. People insist not only on their own contrary opinions, but on their own set of facts that are at odds with the facts that everybody else sees. People seem incapable of acknowledging that anyone knows anything more than they do about anything. There's a sense of glorifying in their commonness and ridiculing the experts, ridiculing anybody who claims to know anything more. I first saw this back when I was a young man. I started out as a Free Will Baptist before I was a Presbyterian and a Catholic and other things. And I remember when I was planning to head off to Bible college to learn how to preach. I'd been preaching since I was 15, but I was going to finally learn how. There were people who pulled me aside, well-meaning people, and said, now don't let them change you. I thought, well, that's why I'm going. I want to be changed. I need to be changed. But they said, don't let them change you. Don't let them turn you into one of them 2x4 educated preachers. Like that was a bad thing. Education was dangerous. It could make you think other thoughts. And that attitude, I didn't see it anywhere else for a while, but now it seems like it's everywhere. Lots of people don't want to have their ideas challenged. It seems like 1/3 of our population, 1/3 of our friends and neighbors and relatives have slipped into a mindset that is difficult to understand or explain from the outside. They choose to trust conspiracy theories more than medical professionals and journalists and scholars and experts of every kind. I was for a long time just calling this mentality stupidity. But I started to see that that's not the case. I know people who have fallen into this mentality who are by far smarter than I am. They're intelligent, capable people. And somehow they've slipped into this mindset of not just ignorance, but a glorification of ignorance. So I've begun now to allow for the fact that it may not just be sheer stupidity. There's a level of actual brainwashing, I think, involved in this. An outright disdain for any opinions that differ from our own, no matter how well they might be backed up. this ignorance not only exists, it has become institutionalized. It's become entrenched in the mainstream of our political system. Now, it's time for another disclaimer. I don't like to talk about politics from the pulpit. Honestly, I think we should avoid talking about specific parties and specific people as much as possible. I think we should address principles. But the situation being that so much of what we are dealing with and so much of what we have been subjected to has come directly from our political situation, I'm going to talk about it. It may seem like I am embracing a particular political party or endorsing them. I'm not. Honestly, I don't like either of them. I'd love to see them both disbanded. They both have way too much power, in my opinion, and I don't belong to either of them. That said, neither do I accept the false equivalency that a lot of people try to put forward. Some people seem to say, well, one party's as bad as the other. One party's no better than the other. One politician's no better than the other. They all lie. They all cheat. They're all crooks. As if that levels the playing field and there is no moral high ground possible. I do not accept that. There is still moral high ground possible. It may seem like I'm vilifying a particular individual. I'm not. Honestly, as a human being, I pity him. If I vilify him, it is as the masthead, the embodiment, the personification of a mindset. And it is the mindset that is the problem here. Imagine what it would be like to love adoration so much that you would do anything for it, and at the same time to always be teetering on the brink of humiliation because on some level you recognize that you're not who you're claiming to be. Must be a horrifying way to live. I'm not embracing any particular political party or politician because the division in American politics has gone way beyond the old lines of right and left, liberal and conservative, big government, small government. Those arguments don't even apply anymore. We're dealing with one group of people who have a mentality that says we should hold on to the institutions that have protected our liberties and our freedoms in the past, even when those institutions are not convenient for what we want right now. That mindset, as opposed to another group who seem to have a mindset that says we should just tear those institutions down if they're not working for us right now. And if that's what it takes for us to stay in power, we'll do it. We'll tear them down. For the first time in my memory, possibly for the first time in history, we have a president who embraces and propagates conspiracy theories that most of the rest of us find laughable. We have a president who lies and lies, constantly lies, about things that don't even matter in some cases. We have a mainstream political machine that would rather stay in power against the people's will than to step down from power according to the people's will. We have a leading political party that loves to wave flags while it actively works to destroy everything that flag stands for. Did you ever imagine you'd see a street in the United States of America cleared by tear gas so a president could have a picture taken holding a Bible he does not read in front of a church he does not attend? We have citizens who consider themselves at the same time patriots and Nazis. Didn't we fight a war about that? This ignorance now has a militant edge that it has not always had. People are prepared to sacrifice civility and respect in anywhere, particularly in social media. People are willing to destroy relationships over ideologies. Remember when it used to be impolite to talk about religion and politics at the table or at family gatherings? Not so much anymore. People are prepared to become angry, violent mobs, to take to the streets and attack innocent people. People are prepared to defend their ideologies with violence. When did you ever imagine there would be a plot to kidnap and possibly murder a governor? When would we ever have thought we would see people openly attempting to overthrow a free and fair election when there is no evidence of fraud? It's a whole new world, people. This cult of ignorance is devoid of compassion. That's one of the scarier things about it. I made a rather uncharitable, inflammatory comment at one point about children being put in cages at the southern border. And an old friend of mine confronted me and said, "How does that help the dialogue?" And I said, "You know what? I don't want to have a dialogue with anybody who's trying to defend this kind of behavior. They are wrong. They need to admit it, and that's all there is to it. There is no dialogue where this is concerned." I've lost lifelong relationships because of this cult of willful ignorance. And you know what? In some cases, I don't even want them back. Because what has been revealed is that the people I thought I knew are not the people I thought I knew. They are somebody else that I never would have been close to begin with. And I don't, not only do I not see any way to recapture, to rekindle those relationships, I'm just not even sure I want to. John Pavlovitz has become a favorite of mine with his social media posts. Many of you probably read him as well. He says this a lot better than I possibly could. And if you'll humor me, I'm going to read a rather long quote of his. This was written, by the way, in mid-April, before the pandemic was in full bloom, before we knew how bad it was going to get. He says, on January 20th, Donald Trump will have been president for 1,460 days. I've been trying to find a way to describe that time, to summarize in a small space the depth and breadth of the injury we've sustained as people and a nation. The word I keep coming back to is waste. These 1,460 days have simply been a terrible, unforgivable, unthinkable waste. A waste of time. The countless hours so many people from every walk of life have had to spend trying to care for people and rebuild their communities and save lives and champion justice and do good work, all while facing their own president as a daily formidable adversary. A waste of financial resources, adding $2 trillion to our national debt, stratospheric corporate bailouts, a widening in the gap between the needy and the greedy, a brazen financial flooding of a spreading swamp. A waste of natural resources, a steady stream of environmental protection rollbacks, wanton disregard for nature and planet and science, and an open contempt for the delicate web of all living things. A waste of energy, the emotional, physical, and mental drain on so many decent people who spent their waking days and sleepless nights trying to reckon with a steadfast malevolence that simply defies reason and escapes comprehension. A waste of ideas, a systematic shutting down of diverse and qualified people, doctors, economists, educators, scientists, creators, and public servants whose qualified presence serves as a threat to the eggshell ego and twitchy ignorance of a historically insecure man-child. A waste of relationships. The violently uncivil wars waged by people for whom this single person has become the hill they're ready to let their closest intimacies die on. The fractures in families and friendships and neighborhoods, the cost of which is incalculable. A waste of human life. The children pulled from their parents at the border, refugees stranded at airports, transgender teenagers bullied to self-harm, victims of gun violence left without protection, people without health care overcome by financial and physical threat, already vulnerable communities subjected to further violence. I try to imagine all we could have accomplished in these 1,460 days as a nation if so many talented, compassionate, gifted, intelligent people hadn't had to spend so much time trying to protect themselves from their own government. The art that could have been created, the medical advances that could have been made, the humanitarian work that could have been done, the habitats we could have protected, the species that could have been saved, the equity that might have been achieved, and that unfathomable loss grieves me. I try to imagine how different this place would have been if our leadership had celebrated diverse humanity instead of assailing it. If they'd have generated compassion and not had contempt for it. If they'd have wanted more people to be seen, not less. If they'd have desired collaboration and not confrontation. If they'd have trafficked in hope and not in fear. If they'd have wanted to make America defined by goodness and not greatness. But since we have hopelessly squandered this season of our story with this catastrophic error in judgment, the only way to rectify it is not to repeat it. By Inauguration Day 2021, we will have spent 1,460 days of 328 million people's collective lives with this cruelty and ignorance and disdain representing and defining us. With the severed ties and fractured families and polluted water and poisoned courts and perverted religion and elevated racism it has yet yielded. This is a tragedy that we will never truly recover from. The only greater transgression, the only more horrible sin, is if we decide to waste a single day more. End quote. We should have got him to do this sermon. So here we are. Where do we start? How do we begin again? We all know that the answer is in dialogue. We've got to talk to each other. We've got to listen to each other. But how do you have dialogue with people who have no particular allegiance to facts? How do you have a dialogue with people who can dismiss any truth they find inconvenient by calling it fake news or simply refusing to believe it, no matter what proof there may be? We all know that listening is the key to reestablishing some sense of sanity in our lives and in our world and in our country. But what if you're the only one who's listening? What if the other person isn't listening? Honestly, I don't know how to go forward. When Harry first started talking to me about doing this sermon, he suggested in his wonderful optimistic way that the title should be 2021, a Year of Hope. I said, Harry, I honestly don't think I can generate that kind of positivity. I think maybe I can give us a starting point, but that's about as far as I can go. So that's where I am. All I really have to offer is a few half-baked suggestions that I myself am only beginning to implement very poorly. They partly come from my own experience of having the rug yanked out from under my feet many years ago when my traditional Christian theology evaporated in front of my eyes and I had to figure out how to move forward. They partly come from a conversation with an old friend a few years ago who told me he was thinking about checking out and he wasn't staying in a hotel at the time. My first suggestion is that we have to make compassion the test of everything. Whatever we do, however we move forward, however we deal with people, compassion has to be at the center of it. We have to be sure that in dealing with people who have lost every sense of compassion, that we don't lose every sense of compassion while we're dealing with them. We have to retain it. We have to model it. We can't lose it in order. This is a situation where you don't fight fire with fire. It won't work. It's been said that every religion teaches compassion. They only differ in where they make the exceptions. I think there's a lot of truth in that. I want to suggest that we take a look at where we make the exceptions and try to retire a few of those if we can. Try to make fewer exceptions. Try to let that compassion extend to some places it hasn't gone to before. Some of us need to extend compassion to ourselves. Most of us, I suspect, have no problem having compassion on ourselves, but we need to be reminded that there are other people in the universe who may also need compassion. Wherever you've been cutting it off, let's try to take a look at it and try to extend it a little farther. My second half-baked suggestion is related to what a lot of you have been reading in those books that tell you to get rid of all your clutter and get rid of all your stuff. I've gotten a lot of good stuff from friends who've read those books and who are decluttering and wanting to get rid of it. But in a similar way, in our lives, we need to get rid of the things that don't work. In some cases, that's relationships. It may be that we've been working too much, worrying too much. Maybe we've been accumulating too much. We need to get rid of the things that were not making our life worth living. And we need to hang on to the things that were making our life worth living. We need to figure out what are the things that truly give us joy. A sandwich shared with friends is better than the most lavish meal I've ever had. And I've come to understand that in new ways. It took about 8 months for me to realize I miss people. But I do. Hang on to the things that make your life meaningful. Let's take a realistic inventory. What do you have in your hands? What can you do? What can I do? What can we do to make things better? How can we make a difference? Find the change that we can make and make it. Find one person, one situation that we can make better. One person we can help, one gift we can give, maybe one mind that we can change. This is a hard one for me. When you're in conflict, try to remember that the enemy is the ideology, not the person who is holding and defending that ideology in the moment. I have failed miserably at remembering this. And that's one of the reasons I've lost some of the relationships I've lost. We need to ask more questions and make fewer proclamations. We need to listen more than we talk. My last suggestion is a weird one. It's one that I've only come about fairly recently. And that is, live every day with the knowledge that we're going to live a little while longer. We don't know how long. And then we'll be dead. When I was a younger man, that would have seemed like a threat. It would have seemed horrible. But the longer I live, the more I come to think that if I see the end coming before it gets here, I may welcome it like an old friend. Let me explain. What it does when you accept your limitations, and particularly your limitation in terms of time, it no longer allows you to bear the weight of the world on your shoulders. We are only responsible for what we do with this little bit of time we have left between now and when we become food for worms. That's it. That's all we're responsible for. We can't even be responsible for for the ultimate outcome of our actions. We can only be responsible for the actions themselves. So let us not be so overwhelmed that we fail to act. Let us find the opportunities we have and act on them. And so with that, I come back around full circle to where I started. One of the things I loved as a young man in school was that the semester was going to come to an end. One of the things I like about the reality of life is that it will not drag on forever. Let's let that limitation motivate us to move forward with hope, with joy, with courage, believing that we can make a difference and committing that we will. Thank you.
This is hymn number 121, We'll Build a Land.
Our closing words. On January 6th, Christians celebrate the Feast of the Three Kings, the Epiphany, which marks the end of the holiday season. For all of us, it is when the work of Christmas begins, as expressed by Howard Thurman. When the song of the angels is stilled, when the star in the sky is gone, when the kings and princes are home, when the shepherds are back with their flocks, the work of Christmas begins to find the lost, to heal the broken, to feed the hungry, to release the prisoner, to rebuild the nations, to bring peace among all, to make music in the heart. So be it. Happy New Year.
here we go, here we go, here we go! Wah! Is that what we're supposed to do?